All uncover. You got it. Rumping around. Yeah. It's oily. I said, yeah, but I got an oil salt like you told me about.
I want to welcome you. Captain Mellors has opened the meeting, and I want to welcome you. This is our 26th annual School of Disclosure. And I want to thank the City of St. Genevieve for hosting us. And I want to thank the people that make this happen within our group. I want to thank Tom Connors, Jim Chesney, Russell Wyatt, who do the auction. That supports this event, and I hope you'll show up at 2 o'clock this afternoon on the Fête du Jour site to participate in the auction with donations and bidding. Other than that, I'd like to start now with presenting Kevin Gladys. He's going to talk to us about French firearms in Nouveau France.
Thank you very much, Richard. I'd like to thank Genevieve, Richard, Gretchen, and all of you for being here today. It's really a privilege and an honor to fly from Canada to be here in the Pays West. This is a very, very important, historically important area in France. For the last 6 months, I got very interested in the history here, and I decided to go through. There's a spot who's called Cassia manuscripts. I'm not sure if some of you know these, but the manuscripts are very, very interesting. So I decided to go through the original, these copy of microfilm, and I decided to pull out some of the information on guns and muskets that I'll present to this day. And tomorrow I'll be talking about knives, axes, tomahawks, all that cool stuff. So today I'll be sort of dealing with French fusils. We call them fusils, and I'll tell you in a moment why. So fusils in the Pays and we'll be stopping at about 1755 because that's where the paper trail sort of stops as far as guns. Of course, guns were used here afterwards, but as far as the French paper trail that demanded the documents, the primary sources, it stopped around 1755 as far as the French thing. Okay, so it's really important to understand that in French, the word fusil can be applied in the military sense. So the word musket, because the French would use fusils for guns and muskets. So it's very hard within historical documents to understand whether they meant a musket, which was a military firearm, or a gun, which was basically a hunting gun. So it's very important to understand that you have to look at the context of the document and who wrote it and to whom and when to really understand the sense of the word. And I think there's a lot of confusion. People use rifle or musket, gun. I'm going to be using the word musket for a military fusil, so military firearm, larger bore. This was used in New France by the military and by the Marines as well, because the Marines were soldiers. And I'll be using the word fusil in the sense of hunting guns. So when I say fusil de chasse, I'll talk to you about all the different categories of types of fusils. These were basically hunting guns with a smaller sort of caliber. You can use a shot and balls for hunting. So we're going to start with the census here that was taken by McCarthy, which was the commandant de Charte in 1752, so we get a good sense of who owned guns or how many people owned guns at Kaskaskia, Fall de Charte, Saint-Philippe, Bord du Rocher, Cahokia, and Saint-Geneviève. So you get a sense of how many muskets or guns. We don't know because they use the word fusil, so it gets kind of confusing where they have muskets or guns. Not quite sure. So this is basically all the types of fusils that I basically found in the Kaskaskia manuscripts. So I just did a quick little chart here. So you've got all these types of fusils. And you'll notice that that big sort of green bar there, that is the generic term fusil. They never really described what it was. They usually said old or broken or long, used, having served. We're not quite sure what type of fusil that is. But all the other ones are specific types of firearms. So we have fusil boucanier, we'll be talking about that. Fusil de tulle, de traite, à langue, de façon, de main, de service, de munitions. Fusil tillonnière, girard, fromage, carrier, de carcass. Of course, this may sound Chinese to you, but I will explain all these terms one at a time in different categories. We're going to start with Marine and Army muskets. They were called in primary source reference fusil de munitions, fusil de marine, or fusil d'infanterie. So muskets used by the soldiers at Fall de Charte, or sometimes by the local militia, were probably marine muskets, manufactured at Toul, which was a manufacturing center, a firearm production center in France, or at Saint-Étienne. For instance, in 1720, Jean Rosette was a blacksmith. He owned a bayonet, which indicates that it would have probably been used with a musket. In fact, Rosette is recorded as having owned both an old fusil, musket, or gun. We're not quite sure. And I'll be talking about livres. This is basically their pounds or their value in money. The livre was a currency back then in France. So the musket or gun was basically it was estimated at 15 or 20 livres. We have Jacques Bourdon. He was the captain of the town militia at Kaskaskia. He owned 3 bayonets, 3 fusils, so we could probably say that he was probably owned some muskets rather than fusils, because bayonets were used on muskets rather than fusils or on hunting guns. And in 1740, of course, we have an inventory list that was done at Saint-Philippe, and there had 8 bad munition muskets. So fusil munition would have been an actual military musket. Okay, so they were around. McCartney to Bucket to Vaudreuil, or sort of McCartney and Bucket to Vaudreuil in 1752 mentioned it would be necessary to send soldiers' fusils to replace those that break. So we can technically say, those are muskets. Here, Gautier with the Sierre de Roche ensign attached from the garrison, wine, brandy, tafia, powder, and sur fusils. Very interesting. So sur fusils probably indicated here a Toul marine musket. And they mention here the king will supply free of charge 100 fusils with bayonets, which of course would indicate that they were muskets rather than hunting guns. Now, to quickly look at some of the muskets probably used here in the Piedmont territory, we have 2 models from Toul here at the top, one being from the 1729-1734 contract, and the other one being one's an Untitled, one's a Grenadier. The Grenadier doesn't have the swivels on it. And you have a fusil à domino. They basically borrowed the barrel bands from 1728 or 17. Yeah, they started in 1728, and they just borrowed that. These are all marine muskets. So this is what the marine soldiers garrison here in New France would be using. Probably here as well. This is a fusil ordinaire à domino, which meant really the barrel bands. This one's an original. It was found in Trois-Rivières, between Montreal and Quebec City. And this one's ordinaire because it doesn't have a swivel, so it's basically just carried like this. There's no strap at all. Some French muskets were used in the 7 Years' War. We're talking about infantry muskets here, being 1728 or 1746 pattern. They were probably used mostly around Quebec City, Montreal, Fort Ticonderoga. I'm not sure if they ever made it here. It would be very unlikely because they were mostly used by the troupes de terre, which were basically the French army sent to France to help out during the Second World War. Did they make it out all the way here? I'm not sure. Maybe archaeology will be able to tell us. And there's another type of military musket that was used as well. A couple of years ago, I started doing some research on these famous Liège guns. Actually, they turned out to be muskets. At the time, during the War of the Austrian Succession and the 7 Years' War, there's a shortage of muskets in France. So Saint-Étienne, being the French sort of manufacturing center for firearms, couldn't produce enough muskets for the French army. Actually, it was for the Marine, Saint-Étienne, and there was Charleville and Maubeuge. They couldn't produce enough muskets for the army. So the French government had to go to Liège to get some copies of their Model 1728s. And so they basically asked a certain man by the name of Jacques Vallée, and he was asked to copy 1728s. He sent thousands to France. And I think 3,400 rather were sent to Canada, and they weren't very good at all. After an inspection in Quebec, there were only 1733 good ones, or sorry, 733, and many of the natives refused to take them. So there was an instance where it actually blew up, and the natives would bring back the pieces. Got barely all broken up to the governor, saying that these are not very good. So a lot of historians have thought that these were hunting guns, and they're not. They're actually muskets. They're copies of 1728s. And this is a restock that was found right on the border of Quebec and Ontario. It was made by Vallée, and it's a restock because it's very crude, and it would be walnut. This is probably yellow birch. Here we're going to move on to hunting guns. This is a large category of all sorts of different types of guns. Now, when we say guns, again, these have a smaller caliber. You can use them with shot balls. They're mostly for hunting. Now, we had a chance to find a lot of the French gun-making patterns in France. So I did a lot of research in Germany and France, and I found out that the French gun makers using specific pattern books. These are dated, and so they copy the style of butt plates, trigger guards, and so on. Even the engraving, that's very specific sort of style. Not at all. The French were very fashionable. They followed fashion to a T. That applies to furniture. That can apply to architecture as well, and that applied to basically gun making. So we found these pattern books, and all of a sudden we can actually now look at a gun part found archaeologically, look at its style compared to the pattern book, and we can date. So what I've done in my book here is that I actually took all of these pattern books and I put them back to back, and I traced the evolution of the French fusil, the hunting gun. Now I know that T.M. Hamilton, being a pioneer in basically researching French guns and muskets, had developed the Type C, the Type D sort of category. Well, based on, in light of new research and what we found, let's just say that there's been some changes. So the Type C would refer to a late Louis XIV style, all the way up to about 1725. And then a Type D would go from 1708 all the way to 1760. So there's some overlap. So I think that we may have to re-examine some of those parts and probably date them based on those company patterns. Now, some of you may have the handout. Okay, this slide here is on the handout for any of you that are interested in understanding more about the Type C, Type D, and the French gun making patterns. Okay, we're going to look at something that's fascinated me throughout the years. It's called the pied de vache, which can be translated to cow's foot. It's the buttstock profile of the French guns, basically. You'll notice that there's a very interesting evolution. You'll really start to see that it starts, at this point here, starts to curve at the bottom first. And then by I'd say even 1740, the nose of the cone starts to sort of swell up a little. It starts to have a nice, gentle curve. There's an evolution that we traced on dated guns in France. So I took dated guns and Torstelin's book. Torstelin was a researcher who published a great book on French guns. And he had found a lot of dated French fusils, and so I took those and I traced them, and I really start to notice that there's an evolution in the pied de vache, which would be the cowskin or the buttstock profile. Now what's interesting too is back in the days in New France, barrels were a lot longer than we think. Based on archival documents, primary sources, we're starting to realize that the most popular length for a barrel would probably be about 51 inches. 51 inches and 1/4, sorry. And the longer ones are around 57, and the shorter ones are around 46, round off to 47 inches. Okay. So that's something that came to light after looking at thousands and thousands of primary sources. We really start to realize that, you know, guns were a lot longer than we think they are. Okay, we're going to talk about the fusil de chasse de Sud. This is a specific type of hunting gun. It was very, very popular. 3 records of fusils described as from Sud can be found in the Kaskaskia manuscripts in the 1740s. So we have Charles Marazeau. He had a fusil de Sud. François Lenid sans chagrin at Fort de Chartres, he had a fusil de Sud. And Jean-Baptiste de Saint-Laurent, lieutenant of the Compagnie Franche de Varenne for Louisiana, he had a fusil de Sud as well. Notice this one's very, very expensive, 60. So maybe there's extra engraving on it, something special. Not quite sure. But the fusil de chasse, the tool model, was basically a marine musket, and it was kind of trimmed down, lightened a little, using a hunting gun barrel. The stock was a little sort of smaller. The lock plate as well. Everything was kind of trimmed down basically on it. And that became a very, very popular gun in New France. Most Canadians and some of the domiciled natives that were living around Montreal that were Christians, the Catholics, would be using some of these or asking for them. Okay? And what's really interesting here is a quote by Pontchartrain. He was the Minister of Marine. And he said, "What we call fusil de chasse or guns, whereby the gun locks and furniture are more delicately made, so proportionally smaller in size, than those for the troops. The barrels are also much lighter, using less matter, iron, and the calibers of 28 balls per lead." Notice that that's a typical or standard size for a hunting gun barrel caliber. Here at the bottom we have the exchange rate for these fusil de chasse at Fort Niagara. So for 28 raccoon pelts or 7 beaver pelts, you could get a tool hunting gun for Fort Niagara. This is a drawing made by Lucette Bouchard. He published a really good little booklet on fusil de chasse. So this is what they would look like. And there's different models, or at least contracts. So certain years they would make them a little longer, a little shorter, a little different. We're still looking for a specific contract from the 1741 period. This is very interesting, and it's an ex-voto. It's probably the only painting that we know of depicting French Canadians wearing a capot, belt. You got the garter here, the souliers sauvages, mitas, which would be the leggings. These are Canadians, just like they would probably look like here at Saint Genevieve, probably in the 1730s. Very close. So, I mean, these men could have traveled here or could have lived here, I guess, at one point. But what's interesting is that they actually painted a gun here. And you can't really tell here, but if you do a close-up, you got an interesting sort of S-shaped side plate with medallion in the middle, which is very typical to the fusil de chasse and the tool model. Now, at one point, the manufacturer of tool couldn't produce enough for the colonies, so they were in need of a lot of guns here. So many, in fact, that the manufacturers in France just couldn't pump them out fast enough. So they had to go to another manufacturer. So they called upon Saint-Etienne, which was another manufacturer in France, copies of this fusil de chasse model. And here we have a copy, a Saint-Etienne copy of a fusil de chasse model that's in the Stewart collection in Montreal. Pretty much all original except for a few little touch-ups here. Little nicks and things that were fixed up on before stock.
And that would be considered a Type C?
Nope, that's not all the types. That's a fusil de chasse. Yeah. So if you say fusil de chasse, now again, fusil de chasse in France, if you go to France, you say fusil de chasse, they say that's any hunting gun. But in Canada, in the context of New France, they adopted the term fusil de chasse for this specific type of model of gun. So you'll notice there's just the profiles here, the butt plating, the side plate. It's very specific to this model of hunting gun. Okay. We're going to move along to fusil de traite, which was very popular here in the Illinois territory. So fusil de traite, trade guns, that's what it translates to. We're found in Kaskaskia and Kaskaskia manuscripts. We're priced, you look 10, 20, 25, they're priced all the way up to 83 livres, okay, between 1721 and 1740. They are the most numerous types of fusils found in these records during the French period. Okay? The ones that were usually termed old, vieux, were priced at 10 livres. Okay, so this is a very, very popular type of gun. Now I just sort of added a few little interesting quotes here that I found showing us that fusil de traites were very, very popular. What's very interesting is this here. It's a proposal to use trade guns to arm the local militia. So it says here I have, and this is between Vaudreuil, which was the governor in Louisiana, and McCarty, who was to come on down here, 1752. I have further represented to the minister the advantage that would ensue to the Illinois to have a company of volunteers on horseback in the present circumstances, and to that end have suggested a prompt dispatch of fusil de traite, pistols, and the munitions more necessary for your defense. Okay, so it's interesting that he wants to armor the militia here with fusil de traites and pistols. Okay, and we'll see later on that they're on horseback as well, which is very interesting. So if you look over there on horseback, that when I saw that, I thought that was quite interesting. You don't have that in Canada. You don't see the militia going around on horseback. Okay, and I have a feeling here it's because maybe some of the lowlands, some of the open areas. Okay. Now, the term fusil de traite in French can be translated again to trade gun. It's a lower grade flintlock gun that was sent to New France, and the majority of these were made in and around the town of Saint-Etienne. And we have found that, and we'll talk about semi-fine guns. Semi-fine guns corresponded to fusil de traite. So they were probably the lowest grade of a hunting gun that you could find. You'll notice some of the natives here. This is a drawing of Canadian natives from about 1730, and they're likely using fusil de traite, and you'll notice the long barrels, how long they are. Okay? So these are probably the 4 pied barrels, so probably around 51 inches. This is a presumed fusil de traite. It's left-handed. It's in collection in Pennsylvania right now. There you go. Very simple. Not a lot of engraving, but I would probably consider this like a fusil de traite. Yeah. Now we're going to talk about another type of hunting gun. It's fusil à l'encre, or fusil à double encre, which could be translated to anchor mark guns and double anchor mark guns. Okay. So we found a few of these here, starting in the 1730s. So Monsieur Dutisné, working for the Compagnie des Indes in Kaskaskia, owned 4 of these types of guns. Louis Poise of Saint-Philippe owned a mid-size fusil à l'encre, and Jean-Baptiste de Saint-Laurent, he was the lieutenant of the Compagnie Franche de Marine, owned a small, so probably a short fusil à l'encre. And this is one of the markings that you would find on a lot of these. These were hunting guns. So what's interesting is that in 1747, they really mentioned on a specific French merchant's invoice that these guns are hunting guns. It says, fusil à l'angle de chasse. So it really confirms that these are not marine muskets. So if you see an anchor mark on the lock plate, they're not a marine musket. In fact, we've never seen an anchor mark that I know of from New France with the good context with an anchor mark on the lock plate. Okay. Now, if you go to Fort Niagara in 1750, you can get one of these beautiful guns for 7 beaver pelts or 28 record pelts, which are pretty much the same as a fusil de chasse from Toul. What's interesting here is we found in France, these are not even part of the colonial records, I found this just looking up random stuff, that a certain man called Monsieur was making these, fusil monté à l'encre, which confirms that really these were made by a man from Saint-Etienne, so these were all coming from the manufacturing of Saint-Etienne.
This guy.
And of course we have the fact that they said that the barrels were 3 pieds 9 pouces, which would be around 48 inches. So they were fairly long guns. But you had 3 sizes. You had the short, the mid-size, and the long as well. This is a typical fusil à l'encre. And these are very popular guns with the voyageurs and also for the trade. People would be using these as trade guns as well, as we saw with the exchange rate at Fort Niagara. This is another original. And these men here were French Canadians. Yeah. And they're probably using a fusil à l'encre here, probably. And so this is probably the mid-sized gun. The long one would be a little longer. People were a little shorter, kind of like me, maybe 7, or maybe sort of 5'6", 5'7", maybe. That was probably the tallest French Canadian back then. Okay, so they're also double anchor mark guns, or guns with double anchor marks. And these were engraved on the lock plate, so you see really two engraved anchor marks. What's really interesting is, I'll talk about that after, but I just want to go up to another document here. I found this, this is an invoice from a merchant in 1757. What's really interesting is he writes fusil, double, and then he draws 2 anchors. So which really shows us that this is what he saw on the lock plate of the gun, and he just drew it. Rather than actually write it, fusil double ancre, double anchor, he decided to draw it. So, which is proof that that's what it is really in fact. And this is a double anchor marked fusil. You can see the 2 crosses. Made by Soldat, which was a maker at Saint-Etienne. These were all made at Saint-Etienne. Okay, we're going to talk about fusil fin, fusil demi-fin. So there's different grades in guns. So what's interesting here is in 1736, they're sending fusils to the Illinois post, including 8 fusil fins, so fine guns, and 1 long fusil fin, so which tells us that they came in the long size and probably the mid-size. Very expensive, before you leave here. And they're recorded in the Kaskaskia manuscripts, so you see a few of these, not very often. So the term fang, probably, or fine, was used to describe various types of guns. It's not a specific type. You can't say that this is a standardized type of fusil fin. There's different types. They look differently at different periods. What's interesting is this definition here. It's from a dictionary, a French dictionary dated to 1751, and they say there are differences between these types of guns and other ones in that these are finer, having an escutcheon as well as a side plate in relief form or with additional decorative elements. So that kind of gives you an idea. But there's no set model that you say, this is a fusil fin, this is a fine fusil. There's maybe 20, 30 different types of fusil fins. It's just a matter of who wrote down that descriptive term that morning in a shop and looked and said, oh, that looks like a fusil fin to me. Okay, it's a fusil fin, so it could be very subjective. So this is what I probably believe to be a fusil fin. See some of the engraving. You can see that there's a little sort of molding around the trigger guard. Little finer details that you'll see on this gun when we try and mix it a fusil. Okay. As I mentioned beforehand, semi-fine guns, you'll probably trade guns because we found in one of the dictionaries of the period that they're saying that semi-fine guns manufactured in Saint-Étienne were being sent to New France as basically for the fur trade as trade guns. So semi-fine guns, from what we know so far, probably correspond to trade guns. Which gets a little confusing. I apologize for that. The French were very confusing. Trying to make sense out of all this stuff takes a lot of patience. So we're going to talk about fusil de façon and demi-façon, so fancy and semi-fancy guns. So we're in another category. So there are a lot of fusil de façon showing up here in the Illinois territory, starting in 1721 all the way up to 1729. And you'll look at the prices, 80, 200, 150, 100, 100. These were very, very fancy guns. These were high-end guns, and they were used here. Okay, even an officer of the troupe owned a fusil de façon in 1723 with its powder gun. All right, so these were actually produced at Saint-Étienne, and they're actually recorded in New France as guns traded with the natives, seigneurs, which would be the nobles, and also once in a while the habitants, the locals, the colonials would own some of these very beautiful guns. If you go to Fort Niagara, so for 15 beaver pelts or 60 raccoon pelts, you could probably get a fusil de façon with a longer barrel, and a shorter barrel one would be 10 beaver pelts or 50 raccoon pelts. This is what I probably consider a fusil de façon. You'll notice that the engraving is a lot finer, and everything about this gun is, you know, there's some really neat little sort of details that make them a little higher grade than a fusil fin or a fine gun. And what's interesting is that I found the document that tells me that these were coming from Saint-Étienne. So these were actually made in Saint-Étienne. We have proof from primary records, which is very nice. This wasn't included in the book, so this is actually unpublished information we're looking at. Fusil de maître, this is another category, so master-made guns. So they were made by master gunsmiths in France. So you thought a fusil de façon was nice. Fusil de maître is even nicer. This is like the top of the line. This is the Porsche or the Lamborghini of fusil in New France, okay? I did a little chart here. Don't want to spend too much time on this, but you can see that they were used from 1724 to 1748. Even Michel Philippe with his casque, he owned 4 of these. Pierre Millet. We have Pierre Saint-Ange. You'll notice that some of them are a little cheaper. That probably indicates that they were older. They may have been maybe 10, 15, 20 years old, used a lot, and so they may have been priced or esteemed at a lower sort of cost. But you look at this one here, 470 for one gun. I can't even imagine what this looks like. Maybe gold-plated, silver-mounted. Who knows? But this is, I've never seen a gun this expensive, ever. This was here. Okay, this is a really nice museum that I found in Saint-Étienne in one of their museums. It probably dates about 1760. You'll notice it's all chased. I believe it's silver-mounted. So this would have been probably like a fusil de maître down here, period. There are a few of them, not many, okay? And again, I have some unpublished information here showing us that Saint-Étienne were making these. So these weren't made in Paris, they weren't made in Charleville, they were made in Saint-Étienne. So we're starting to realize that there's this very, very strong tradition of ordering guns from Saint-Étienne for civilians in New France. This really comes out in the records. And you'll notice here, silver-mounted, silver-mounted. You have Damascene in gold, Fred sight in brass, so you can tell that these are very, very nice guns. I'd like to own one myself, but oh well. Fusil de tirailleur, Gérard, and fromage. So all of a sudden I started finding these weird guns or described with gun makers' names here in the Illinois territory. It's interesting because I had a section on these same makers in my book. So all of a sudden I start seeing a fusil fromage. Cheese, fromage, no, that's actually the name of a maker at Saint-Étienne. Girard, that's another maker at Saint-Étienne. Tirailleur, these were all found here, okay? So Sieur François Lacroix, he was here in the Illinois territory. Jean-Baptiste de Saint-Laurent, in Sainte-Geneviève. François Labrec, ou Larocque, blacksmith, had a fusil tirailleur in 1755, right here, in this village. Made by Tirailleur of Saint-Étienne. Here is a fusil de tirailleur. It's actually written on the top barrel, Tirailleur Frère. And yeah, this is probably one of the oldest, I would consider probably a trade gun or a civilian gun that we know of in New France. This one's probably dated about 1720, 1730. And another type of, well, if they're not guns, they're muskets now. Fusil Boucanier Buccaneer muskets were actually found here in the Illinois territory. Yes, they were. I know this may be a shock to some of you. Really, Buccaneer guns? Yes, they were actually used here. What's interesting is this watercolor here by Dumont de Montigny. I'm sure if you know who that is. He traveled around the French Louisiana in 1719. You may not see it, but you'll notice the profile of this gun stock here, the buttstock. Looks a lot like a Buccaneer. In fact, we found a few Buccaneers here in Kaskaskia. Pierre Millet, this is really interesting. 1726, he owned a fancy Buccaneer musket. Now, what does that look like? So probably a Buccaneer musket with engraved side plate, trigger guard. And then we have François Lacroix and François Hénin, who owned a fusil Boucanier. So these were very interesting type of muskets, very bulky. And you'll notice that it's got a very specific type of buttstock profile. Okay, I'm just going to quickly read this here. French Buccaneer guns, or fusil Boucanier, takes its name from smoked meat, boucan, prepared in the French Indies by hunters who supplied commissary stores to the plantation ships. And the salient feature of the Buccaneer gun, or musket, is its very long barrel and flat-sided club butt with convex lower profile. So these were originally marine guns used by sharpshooters aboard French fusils, and they were used here probably for hunting. I can imagine that these were probably very good with the buffalo. And then we have fusil de service. We're not quite sure what this type of fusil is. It is likely a fusil that was designated for the service of a farm, a trading post, or a house. So they probably had a gun in the house, specifically for that house, or for that post, that trading post. They had their own guns. So if you want to go hunting, you can use your own gun or use the service gun that was probably there on site. We don't know what they look like. We don't know what they are, but they're here. We also have carabins, which are short flintlock guns. Well, actually, some of them are rifled, some of them are probably smoothbore, because we've been finding a lot of these carabins in New France, and they're very cheap, which would probably indicate that they're more smoothbore than rifled. And Lecour, who died at the house of Roy at Fort-de-Champs, he had 2 carabins as part of his belongings. And the Cardi here, again, mentions carabins for dragoons. He wants to put in place some dragoons here in Kaskaskia, which is very interesting. So we talked about the militia being on horseback with fusil de traite. Well, there are probably carabins or short fusil de traite. And this can be found if you want to look up some of these quotes in Illinois on the eve of the 7 Years' War, 1747, 1755. It is to be noted, and I'm going to say this quite loud, that no New France-related colonial reference referring to civilian guns or trade guns manufactured at the Charleville or Maubeuge arms and production centers have been found at this point in time. So we have not found any records of hunting guns being produced at Charleville or Maubeuge in the records. None. These were all coming from Sud or Saint-Étienne, and a few of them were coming from Paris. Okay, gun restocking in the colonies. It was very important for New France to restock guns because France couldn't ship enough guns, so they were stuck without guns, so they had to kind of make do, so they were using old parts and restocking them. These are just some of the parts that were shipped to Canada in 1757. So the king probably thought it best to just ship parts directly and have the colonials make their own guns with using parts and barrels that they had. So you'll just notice that these parts were ordered from Saint-Étienne in 1757 for Canada. So you look at, I'll just give you an example here, 1,440 trigger guns. That one here, just sent to Canada. Okay. So restocking guns in the Illinois, yes, many gun parts were found in the inventory list through the Kaskaskia manuscripts, revealing that restocking and repairs of firearms was very present here in the Illinois country. For example, in 1720, Georges Dozal, a blacksmith, he had trigger guards, butt plates, gun barrels, and 4 wood gun stocks. Okay. 1737, Dominique Quesnel was a practicing gunsmith in Kaskaskia. That's known. And we have in 1737 a master gunsmith by the name of Jean-Baptiste Becquet. And it's very interesting what he says here. He's talking about having Monsieur Huard to supply the gun stocks proper to restocking arms. It could be fusils, muskets, or guns. Here we have a master carpenter who had in his possession lock plate and miscellaneous gun furniture, so indicating possible restocking of guns. In a letter written in 1752, he talks about asking a certain gunsmith to fix many guns for the natives. And here we have some of the woods used for restocking shoulder weapons in New France. So we have a mention in 1664 using yellow birch for restocking weapons. Maple in Canada, maple and yellow birch, some pieces were to be sent to France in 1735. This is interesting. A letter from Versailles. I will give orders to Ile-Royale, Cape Breton, and Louisiana to annually send some timbers of yellow birch and walnut of the dimensions you asked for. So whether they're shipping yellow birch or walnut from here down to New Orleans, I guess. Not quite sure. Or are they only sending walnut from here and yellow birch from Ile-Royale, which is Ribourg? We're not quite sure. 1739, the King's Storehouse in Montreal, Eau de Man, 10 livres for 55 boards of yellow birch for the gunsmith. So they're definitely using a lot of yellow birch. And there was a translation that had some issues with at one point, and they mentioned the wild cherry tree of Louisiana appropriate for making gun stocks. I looked up that term, and it's merisier, which could be confused with cerisier, which is cherry wood. Merisier is actually yellow birch. So the chances are that they're probably using yellow birch rather than cherry for restocking. And we're going to quickly look at powder horns, shot pouches or bags, bullet molds, if you don't mind. We're just going to quickly finish through this. So yeah, powder horns, bullet, shot, pouches, bags, and bullet molds were recorded in the Kaskaskia manuscripts. They probably look like this if you had a shooting bag. One was described as bullet pouch of blackened, smoked deer hide decorated with porcupine quills. And this was in 1737. And that was Monsieur Didier. He was a lieutenant of the troops. Okay. Powder horns were also owned by a number of residents here in the Illinois. Dozal, the blacksmith, had one. Girard, Flocourt. And also they mentioned McCarty and Vaudreuil mentioned powder horns here, bullet pouches. So lead bullet shot molds were also widespread. So they're actually making these here as well. For instance, 2 iron pieces were described as to make shot or bullet molds here in the Illinois Territory in 1726. One bullet mold at Pierre Millet's house was termed a three-ball mold. So you can make 3 balls of that mold. So they're making a lot of lead balls here, and I started looking into it, and of course there's a lot of lead mines in the area, which makes a lot of sense. So they're actually making their own bullet molds here, probably because they can't ship enough from France, and it's so hard and so far to ship, even from Canada or up the Mississippi from New Orleans. So that was very interesting when I saw that. I figured, no, that's why they got all those bullet molds that you don't necessarily see in Canada. We don't see these in the inventories in Canada. So I thought that was very specific to this territory. Well, anyways, looking through all this material and reading about all this stuff and researching it, made me realize how important this whole territory was to New France. This was really an extension of Canada, and even Canadians moved down here, and it was really just this very incredible little area, using a lot of the same items that we're using up in Canada or in New France, this being part of New France. So I felt that I figured I would share this with you this morning. I hope you didn't mind the presentation. I know it was a little long, a lot of information to probably digest, probably some new terms for you, so hopefully I didn't confuse you. I know there's a lot of French words in there, and that's why I had a glossary prepared. If you want a glossary with some of those terms, not a problem. I can probably get you a photocopy. So, any questions at this point? Yes, sir.
On the use of the yellow birch, why did they pick yellow birch? Does it have any?
Well,
I've never stocked with yellow birch before.
It's a hardwood. It's a hardwood in Canada, and it's probably very comparable to walnut. It's got a nice tight grain. It's easy to work with. They use it for legs of tables and chairs. Something in New France. If you go to any museums and you look at old tables and chairs, you'll notice that they're made out of the legs are made of yellow birch. So they must have been good to work with.
Where was the production of the yellow birch within Canada?
Anywhere.
Was it milled?
It was probably just cut wherever they were. There's probably some mills, and were cut on site. Because I know that they're restocking guns everywhere. Fort St. Joseph, they're restocking guns. Fort Michilimackinac, Detroit, I think even Fort Gatineau. Any of the blacksmiths or even the gunsmiths working at those posts are restocking guns. And we don't know if they're using walnut or yellow birch, but they're probably cutting it right on site, drawing it for a couple of years, and using it. But it'd be interesting to get more research and try to find more information on what type of woods would they be using for restocking guns and muskets. It's a very good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. Saint Etienne? Yes, that's it's in the southern western part of France. Yes, sir. Very interesting question. We don't know because there's not a lot. I was asking Richard actually. Are there any pictures or drawings of people that were living here from the period? And he said, not really. So it's really hard. However, I did find this one engraving here where you see, actually, yeah, right here, there's a powder horn right there. This was made in Louisiana. This is probably in the 1760s. I can find you the source for it if you want. But you see the shape of the powder horn right here. Are they buffalo horns? Are they ox horns? We're not quite sure. Because they don't usually describe them in the records. They just put powder horn. What does that tell you? Not much, right? However, in Canada, we did find a mention of a black powder horn. What does that tell you? There you go. And we have some brown ones and some white ones. So it's a mix, right? So if you're going to be using the powder horn, it's your call, really. Yes, sir.
Yeah, 2 questions. Do you run into very many left-handed with French guns? Since that's an affliction of mine.
I found one so far.
One so far.
So actually, you gotta shoot right here.
The first thing I shoot. On so many of the kits and guns that were reproduced that barely have a screw. Could I get your opinion on that?
Okay, which type of guns, when, and where?
Any of the old French guns.
Okay, fusil de chasse, the tool model, screwed. Muskets, screwed for the most part, but there's a pin. It's a very complex question. Some of them are pinned, some of them are pinned and screwed, some of them are just screwed. So I'll have to sit down with you, probably flip through and tell you which models.
All right.
But probably your best bet is to get a copy of this wonderful book here.
Yeah, great plan.
There you go. You can flip through it and have a look and see which ones are pinned, which ones are screwed. All right.
All right.
Okay. Any further questions? Yes, sir.
When was the first rifle barrel made and where?
You got me. Okay, I don't know the answer to this. The first rifle barrel.
The earliest rifle gun, I think, is like from 1540 sometime in Germany. But I think actually I read the Chinese guns were rifle. Now, whether they were spiral turned, just grooved to help reload after they were fired, who knows?
Now, for the French, they found rifle carabins. I found some, but they were mostly for the forts, and there was very few of them. So you can't really justify running around here with a rifle carabin, other than the 6 that I found that was owned by one gentleman called the Chapter that I looked at earlier on. They're very scarce here, very, very scarce. Yes?
Could you tell us a little more about that full-length sighting with
Well, it's very popular on high-end guns. So for a fusil fin, fusil de malte, fusil de façon, that's what you're probably looking at. So you'll have a flat. That's right, yes. But on some of the cheaper guns or the common guns, like the fusil de chasse, the Sud model one, doesn't have it. So it's octagonal, it's 16, and then you got your wedding cases. Any other questions, sir?
In any of your research, have you ever found any evidence of double barrel muskets or?
Yes. Plenty. I found, I think, at least 10 of them so far. And an officer, Escole, very, very popular family in New France. He told a few natives, he was on a war party. He told a few natives, the first one who gets me a scalp gets my double barrel gun. That's when I looked at, whoa, okay, 1750, so they're probably side by side and they're soldered. By 1730, they're doing this at St. Etienne. Yes?
Front and rear sights on muskets.
Front rear sights, yes?
Yeah. Any indications of that type of stuff?
Well, you find both.
Okay.
Together or just individually?
Together.
Together. I think some of the earlier ones, they're very, the rear sight was very uncommon. I think it was more common towards around 1700, between 1698 and 1710. More common in New France, and then afterwards they just got rid of them. For some reason, all the barrels that I've looked at in collections all have a front sight for the most part. Very few rear sights, other than the few archaeological dug examples that T.M. Hamilton discusses in his research.
Any more questions? Kevin, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
Kevin will be speaking on French knives and axes that were used in France and the Illinois territory, Illinois, Illinois.